Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I really appreciate you being with me. And let me say once again how much I appreciate your private messages and emails now to me expressing your appreciation for the great job during my debate last Saturday, October the 26th, with Dr. Richard Carrier. It's very refreshing. It's very supportive, and what have you. And I've just got to say this, and then I'll move on. It continues to amuse me of how Dr. Carrier's cheering section, and we all have those, but nonetheless, his cheering section uh, are just they're out in full force on YouTube, uh, claiming that Dr. Carrier just mopped the floor with me. He just really did a job on me, and I would say probably the comments are 5-1 atheist against supporters of Christianity, and yet not one of them has offered a single substantive comment any different from what Dr. Carrier said. They're simply repeating what he said. But what he said was invalid. He said Jesus shared the common Jewish expectation of the end, a literal end. And I proved that false. And it's like none of these people heard that. None of those people saw my charts, my presentations of how Jesus categorically rejected the standard Jewish belief of the time. So that shows you there is an incredible bias, an incredible inability to offer any evidence to the contrary. It's just you just repeat the same mantra. But anyway, that aside. Okay, as promised. Now, yesterday I rehearsed a little bit the incredible significance of Zechariah chapter 14 as it discusses the day of the Lord with the coming with all of his saints at the time of the judgment of Jerusalem. Now, that judgment of Jerusalem is nothing other than AD 70. And by the way, I'm not the first to say that or believe that. This is a well-attested view in scholarship. It is a well-attested view even among ancient writers. And they said Zechariah 14 was predicting the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. It wasn't predicting the day of Antiochus Epiphanes. Because as I've shared with you just recently on my Friday sessions, none of the things that Zechariah predicted were fulfilled in the times of Antiochus Epiphanes. None of them. There was no river of life that was opened to give blessings and eternal life to the nations. Hello, didn't happen. So, anyway, I shared with you how the book of Zechariah depicts the creation of a new Jerusalem. Zechariah depicts out of this new city, this new Jerusalem, flows the river of life, and it flows to all nations. And it depicts that after this fall of Jerusalem, after this day of the Lord, the nations of the earth come up to Jerusalem there to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. And refusal to do so results in a curse. Well, by the way, that sort of kind of destroys the doctrine of universalism. If you don't celebrate the Feast of Sukkot, if you don't worship the Lord, you're condemned. You're cursed. That's not hardly universalism, is it? But I digress. Okay, so we come to the book of Revelation. And in the book of Revelation, we have in chapter 7, John saw the 144,000. In addition to the 144,000, he saw a great multitude out of every nation, kindred, tongue, and tribe, a great multitude that no man can name. These all came out of the great tribulation. And a promise was made to them that they would be led to the river of living, or that they would be led to living water. Revelation chapter 14 tells us a little bit more about who these were. They are the first fruits of those redeemed to God from among men. Therefore, that means they are the first generation of Christians. And specifically, in regard to the 144,000, they are the first fruits of all 12 tribes of Israel to be converted to Christ. Now, look, folks, that means they're the first generation. First fruit doesn't mean 50th generation, 100 generations, 1,000 generations in the future. It doesn't mean that, and it cannot mean that. First fruit means first fruit. Oh, just like we're told, Jesus was the first fruits out from among those who had died previously. 1 Corinthians 15:19. Well, that means that Jesus was the first fruit of Old Covenant saints, those who had died before him. But you know, he wasn't the first person to be raised biologically, was he? Okay. Nonetheless, the 144,000 are the first fruits of those redeemed to God from among men. Now, watch this. This is so good. This is really, really good. The nations, according to Zechariah 14, after the day of the Lord, after the coming of the Lord in judgment against Jerusalem, the nations, that's those who are not of Israel, the restoration of Zion, as I pointed out yesterday, is the restoration of all 12 tribes. It is the salvation of Israel. This is, quote, all Israel being saved, unquote. And no, it is not every single Jew who ever lived. It is those, as depicted in Revelation 7 and Revelation 14, those who had cleansed their robes, made them white in the blood of the Lamb. These are Christians. And they are the remnant of Old Covenant Israel. They are not every single Jew who ever lived. Remnant means remnant, folks. It's not all. It's all the remnant, but it's not all. So, they are promised in accordance to Zechariah 14. Oh, and by the way, in accordance with Isaiah 49. Just a real quick look at Isaiah 49. In Isaiah 49, verse 6 and following, Yahweh said, speaking to his Messiah, speaking about his Messiah that is to come, it is too small of a thing for you to be the Redeemer of Israel and to restore the tribes of Jacob. Now, look, folks, as scholarship has said forever, this depicts the salvation of all Israel, the remnant, because that's what it's talking about is the remnant. So it's depicting the salvation of, quote, all Israel, but then the Lord says, it's too small of a thing for you to save Israel, the tribes of Jacob. Saving Israel would not be enough. Thus, salvation is not for Israel only. I will also make you a light to the nations. Salvation of Israel, salvation of the Gentiles, salvation of the nations. Now, notice what he goes ahead to say. This would take place in the acceptable time in the day of salvation. Isaiah 49, 6-8. It would be the time of the restoration of the land, as it says in the King James and New King James, restoration of the earth. But then in verses 10 and following, it's the time of the wedding. Well, that's between Yahweh and Israel. But then what does it say? I will lead them to living or to springs of living water. I wonder if that's the same river of life as Zechariah 14. I wonder if that is the same river of life as Ezekiel 40 to 47. You know, the river of life that flows out of Jerusalem after Gog and Magog. In other words, after the day of the Lord. and everywhere it flows, it brings life. Oh, except certain places. It doesn't produce life to everything and everyone. No, there are limitations. So we have in Ezekiel, we have in Isaiah, and we have in Zechariah the promise that after the day of the Lord, after the judgment on Jerusalem and Israel, the establishment of a new Jerusalem. And flowing out of that new Jerusalem is the river of life. And not only the remnant of the 12 tribes would be led to that, but the great multitude that could not be numbered would drink of that river of life. And not only that, after this day of the Lord, the nations would come up to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkot and to obviously drink of the river of life. I mean, if you're in Jerusalem and the river flows from Jerusalem, the river of life, and somebody wants to tell me, no, they didn't go up there to partake of the river of life. I'm sorry, that just makes no sense whatsoever. So anyway, what do we find in Revelation? In Revelation, after the judgment of Jerusalem, the city, quote, where the Lord was crucified, unquote, this great harlot city, Babylon, after that judgment, what do we find? John said, Revelation 21, 1 and following, then I saw, John said, I saw. Now, John's going to recapitulate for us, and yes, I believe chapter 20 and following is recapitulation, but I don't have time to do that this morning. I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And I saw a new Jerusalem coming down from God out of heaven. Okay, is this the Zion, restored Zion of Isaiah 49? Is it the restored temple and Zion of Ezekiel 40 to 47? Is it the New Jerusalem of Zechariah 14? Well, if it's not, what in the world is it? And remember, it's God coming down. It's not man leaving the earth. So I saw this New Jerusalem prepared as a bride for her husband. Well, let's see. Isaiah 49, 10 and following, the wedding between Yahweh and Israel. The bride adorned for her husband. Now, what happens? Well, in Revelation chapter 20, John describes this New Jerusalem. And as a young man, I thought it was a description of heaven. And I had a rather immature view that it's talking about, oh boy, there's going to be a literal street of gold. Only one street? That's all it says, street of gold. Anyway, it dawned on me over the years, after more study, it's not talking about a depiction of heaven. After all, it's heaven coming down to man. In that sense, it's, quote, heaven, but it's not the eternal third level heaven. You see, it's spiritual language to tell us God is now dwelling with man. So, the New Jerusalem comes down from God out of heaven. And the voice cries out, the tabernacle of God. Well, let's see. The tabernacle of God is with man. Well, what does this mean? This is Sukkot being fulfilled. It's a statement that what was said in Revelation chapter 20 is now being recapitulated. Chapter 20 is the resurrection. Now we have the celebration of that, the acknowledgement of that, the additional depiction of that. And in chapter 21 and 22, what do we find? Well, in chapter 21, 25, and following, number one, the gates of the city, this is the New Jerusalem of Zechariah 14, the gates of the city are always open, and the nations of the earth. Now, let's notice something. The city itself is built upon the foundation of the prophets, and it's got 12 gates, and the name of the apostles are on the gates. So, how are the nations of the earth entering the city? They're entering by means of Israel's completed work. You know, I had some people just recently, and I'm basically out of time, but I've just got to take note of this. And it says, look, there are 12 gates. So that means that, named after the apostles, so that means that only Jews could enter. Folks, that's one of the most ridiculous statements I've ever seen, or ever heard, or ever read. Let's see. The gates are 12 apostles. That means only Jews can enter. Well, wait a minute. Since they're the name of the apostles, maybe that means that only those 12 individual apostles could enter. If not, why not? I mean, after all, if it's the name of Matthew, if it's the name of any of the apostles, then maybe that means only that apostle could enter. If not, why not? You know, this is like saying, and by the way, I pointed this out to these individuals, and they had no response whatsoever. At Jerusalem, there was a gate called Beautiful. Now, according to the, quote, logic, unquote, of these individuals, that must mean that only beautiful people could enter in that gate. Only beautiful people. I mean, you know, if you're just good looking, you don't get to enter because you're not beautiful. Not only that, they had a gate that was called the Essene Gate. Did only Essenes get to enter there? No. Oh, by the way, there was also a gate called the Water Gate. Well, that must mean you can't enter there because you're not water. Do you see how ridiculous some of these arguments are? It is argumentum ad desperatum taken to the nth degree. But I digress. Okay, so the gates of the city are always open for the nations of the earth after the destruction of Jerusalem to enter in. Folks, this is Zechariah 14. And what are they also allowed to do? Well, not only do they get to enter the New Jerusalem through the finished work of Israel's salvation, being based upon the apostles and prophets, but they get to take of the river of life. Because that river of life flows everywhere, just like Zechariah 14 flows some to the former seed, some to the hinder seed. Just like Ezekiel 40 to 47, it flows everywhere and brings life to everyone who drinks of it. And what are they doing? They're celebrating Sukkot. That's why they're entering into the New Jerusalem. This is the fulfillment of Sukkot. They're participating in the resurrection. This is just a recapitulation of Revelation chapter 20 and the resurrection scene that allows the righteous to enter in. So now in Revelation 20 through 22, it's the righteous who are entering in and participating. Folks, this is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful depiction of the spiritual fulfillment of Sukkot. They're not offering 70 animals in some bloody sacrifice. They're celebrating salvation through the finished work and the fulfillment of Israel's feast days. I'm out of time. Thank you so much for joining me for this morning and morning musings. Be sure to join me this Friday On Friday morning, I'll continue my examination at review and response to Brian Hodges' book, Problems with Preterism. And then Friday night, Mike Sullivan and I continue our study, our fascinating study of the Song of Moses and its impact on New Testament eschatology. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you there.